Hi, and welcome back to ConTinual. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we're going to be diving into little light topics called ethics and responsibility in writing. And we've got a loaded house tonight. So let's go around and let everybody introduce themselves. So, Layla, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Layla Dorine. I write LGBTQ fiction and romance, and I'm looking forward to having a good time with you guys tonight.
Patrick?
I am Patrick Dugan. I am the author of 5 different series, all sci-fi and fantasy.
Nancy?
I'm Nancy Dunne, and I'm the author of several different flavors of fantasy, and I'm very excited about tonight.
Rick?
My name is Rick Gualtieri, and I write horror, comedy, and fantasy, so all sorts of horrible things happen in my books, so can't wait to talk about them.
Venessa?
Hey y'all, I'm Venessa Giunta. I write urban fantasy with horrific elements, primarily in my novels. In short stories, I tend to write a lot of horror, and I'm also a professional editor since 2008.
Lee?
I'm Lee Martindale. I sling short fiction as a writer and editor, and I've been involved in writer disputes with publishers and such.
Well, that's just a hobby.
It's a
Wendy?
vocation.
Hi, I'm Wendy Van Camp. I am Poet Laureate Emerita from the city of Anaheim, California. I write speculative poetry and historical Regency romance and a lot of nonfiction essays, but we won't talk about that today. I'm looking forward to talking about ethics in writing. It's a hot topic and one that I think needs to be discussed.
Well, I'm going to start with an easy question to go ahead and get myself in trouble and give y'all way more latitude than I should. However, we'll never be able to cover all the ground in a number of these sessions that we'll need to cover. So the first question I'm going to throw to everybody is, in writing, in craft, in storytelling, in your work as a creator, what is the top ethical concern that you're looking at today? And Layla, I'll throw that to you.
Really researching and making sure you're getting your facts that you're portraying to your readers correct. Making sure that you've done your due diligence to use a wide variety of sources to fact check, to make sure that the information that you're putting out there in your book is accurate and isn't going to give someone a misconception, but also making sure that you're keeping up to date on the terms and how they're used and things that we should maybe consider outdated and not be using in language.
Patrick?
Yeah, I agree with Layla. I think diversity and making sure that you aren't using stereotypes to drive your narrative, actually portraying things as close to realistic as possible. And I realize in science fiction and fantasy, that's not always, the goal, but, people are people, even if they're aliens. So you want to make sure that you are representing people in the proper light.
Nancy?
Well, as in my real life, I'm a sign language interpreter, so language is my thing. And one thing that I am very careful and cautious about is portraying groups of people and their language and their culture. It's kind of like what Layla said. It's doing it authentically, and if I can't, not doing it. Knowing the point at which I need to stop and not try to do this because this is not my culture.
Rick?
Everybody's put up really good points, Layla, with regards to being authentic, doing your research. One thing I try to do with writing comedy, because sometimes comedy involves mocking things that otherwise we wouldn't be talking about, or would be excluding from language, and trying to be very clear to readers that yes, this is mocking it, this is not supporting it, this is not like my viewpoint. That's one thing that I try to make sure, especially when I go on with social media and stuff to be like, yes, this is fiction. This is making fun of something. No, these are not the beliefs I hold or that I would hope anybody holds.
Venessa?
And for me, it's very similar to what others have said. For me, I mean, absolutely getting everything right. But the other piece of that is the reason I need to get things right is it's important to me that my books reflect reality they're fantasy, so obviously, but like they represent the reality of human beings. So I need to get all that research right if I'm writing a Black character, if I'm writing a lesbian, if I'm writing a trans person, if I'm writing a religious person, if I'm writing, anything that I'm writing, all that research is important because one of my top ethical concerns is showing the diversity and how people are actually more alike than they are different. So that's kind of connected to what everybody's said, but a little piece that I don't know has been mentioned as much. So that's me.
Lee? Oh, yeah. Lee, how about for you?
For me, it's the use of AI to write fiction, and my concern is that writers are not always honest about whether they've done that or not.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you for
probably going
bringing
to
that
come back to that topic a bit here in a little while. Wendy?
Well, I certainly agree with the comments about research. I do write Regency historical books, and I do a lot of research to get the language of the period correct and to explain the customs in a way that isn't jarring to the story so that people realize this is a different time period, customs were different, and that it's a different culture than what we have today. And when you write historical, that's like paramount. You have to do it. And but I think also ethics. I like to write, especially my speculative work. I like to create a more positive view of the future, and I feel compelled to do this. I mean, not all of let's just say there are a few unhappy endings occasionally. But I like to look to the future and to find things that are positive because I feel our world is so focused on the negative that I like to shine a beacon. I don't know if that's necessarily quote unquote ethics, but that's certainly something I like to do personally.
Love that.
So, and Patrick, I'll start with you on this one. When we look at, our responsibilities as storytellers, right? Now, especially if your name is Rick and you're writing some of the characters you write, you might have a few people that are of questionable character. The word reprehensible might come to mind, but they're always fun to read. But as writers, as storytellers, as creators, what responsibility do you think we have to readers in both creating those worlds, those characters, telling those stories, but at the same time balancing how some of the better and lesser aspects of our characters could be used and may have influence on people, influence on the readers, right? Because there's nothing more you want as a writer than to be impactful. And if you're impactful, then you've got to know what of your characters are going to touch your readers. So, Patrick, what do you think about that?
I think as a writer, one of your responsibilities is first off, tell a good story. And part of telling a good story is being able to integrate in kind of like what Venessa was saying, that it's real life and showing that people are much more similar than they are dissimilar. I love that line. And so I really feel like my responsibility is to make sure that I am not doing damage by casting someone as the evil, or the other, because we already deal with that nonstop these days. And really, there are no others. It's just your viewpoint on the world, and if that person fits, which, that is not even a topic for this, but it's just awful. So, when I'm writing, I am looking to make sure that even my, villains have some redeeming qualities, because no one person is completely and utterly evil. Well, with a couple exceptions maybe, but, so we'll just leave it there.
Nancy?
Okay, I don't want to go after Patrick anymore because he answers the questions for me, for heaven's sake. All I would add to that is that's exactly what I'm trying to do with a lot of my villains, and I've gotten a lot of feedback that they are not bad enough. They're unrealistic because they're not bad enough, and I'm like, don't we have enough of that? Come on. So in my use of language and my use of culture for all my characters, one of the responsibilities I feel is that, I think I said this before, is to portray it honestly, to use those aspects that I've chosen to be the kind of the hallmarks of my writing, to portray things accurately, and even if they're icky, because sometimes we have to go to the icky. We always want to say that we're rising above all this and we're giving people something to read that will let them escape from all the ick. But sometimes you got to add in the ick, because otherwise the story doesn't make any sense. And I wanted to echo what Patrick said, that no character is completely good or completely bad. It just depends on what you do with what you've got, I guess.
Rick?
I like how you used me as an example earlier there, but I can't imagine why.
You're welcome.
But one thing I've always been a fan of junk, turn your brain off, TV, movies, entertainment, and that kind of comes through in my writing. Like, I've made no qualms, and I try to emphasize to people that I write to entertain. I'm not there to teach you a lesson. I'm not there to give you a role model. I'm there to give you an escape for a couple hours that hopefully gives you a good time, but hopefully doesn't give you any real life lessons to go with. So I think my thing is especially with regards to maybe drawing in readers, because I have seen authors out there who write in certain genres and they make that their whole personality. I try to always put forth that separation between fiction and reality. That's very important to me, so that people come in and they don't they don't think that they read one of my books and they're like, oh, this is your viewpoint. No, this is the viewpoint of a character I wrote, and that's it. That person does not exist.
Venessa?
Pretty much agree with everything everybody's said so far. The thing I would add is that I try to be really cognizant of how I cast my characters. If it's a thug, in my books, it's probably not going to be a black person. It's just not. I want to be cognizant of the stereotypes we have in the world that are harmful, and not cater to that, right? Not reinforce is the word I think I need. Not reinforce that. So that's probably, I try to be really cognizant of who I'm putting in what role and who they are as a human being or other entity as needed.
Lee?
I'm going to follow up with Vanessa's point, because stereotypes aren't writing. Stereotypes just take an easy way out.
They're lazy.
And I do not, when I'm editing, when I was editing Such a Pretty Face, the theme was fat people as the heroes for once.
I love that. I love that anthology, Lee. Sorry.
Thank you. And I had one guy that brought in, he was 180 degrees out from the guidelines, and he was proud of it. Needless to say, I bounced that story. But, we owe it to the writers to the readers to work for that 5 or 10 cents we're getting per word. And using stereotypes is not it.
Wendy?
Well, the Van Camp goes last.
Not quite.
And I was
No,
about
Layla
to say,
goes last.
oh, that's true. Layla's last this time. But I have to agree with Lee and stereotypes. I think, Venessa, you touched on it too. It's lazy writing. You should not use stereotypes. You need to think outside the box. As a poet, though, I do sometimes use stereotypes to help create images in my work. But that's not prose. That's a completely different animal, so to speak. And so there are some uses of stereotypes, but again, with ethics, you want to be careful what sort of stereotypes you use and for what reason. And like I say, I prefer to write on a more positive, upbeat kind of thing. So usually I'm in pretty good ground when I do things like that. But I also, like I said, it's lazy writing. You really should think more in an overview as a writer and realize that the evil, quote unquote, evil people are usually just people that are the heroes of their own story. That's just they are on a different path from the protagonist. And that's kind of like how I like to think of those sort of things. But I think as writers, it is our responsibility to look forward to what we're writing and to create an environment that's positive. That's about it.
Layla?
I think we have to learn how to read the room and take the temperature of the climate around us too. A lot of my early books were very, very heavy. They were all still romance, but they were very hard fought HEAs for my, main characters. And in the last couple of years, especially traveling more and meeting more of my readers and talking to them about some of the older books and how happy they were to see the lighter Christmas and holiday books that I'd started adding to the collection, because they were like, we love the old books, but we would love to see you do something with balance too. And I'm like, I had to think about that. I'd never challenged myself to really lighten things up. And when I did, I discovered that I can write cute and fluffy, and I love it. And I have such a good time, especially with my daddy and little books for the holidays, and just making them super sweet and giving my readers something that is going to be light and bright. Because, as nice as it is that we're getting so much diversity in our TVs and our movies, we still have the books that have, the queer characters that just don't get their happily ever afters in the end, or that just, don't get a satisfying ending. So giving my characters that beautiful, fluffy, bright, Christmassy, happy ending that they didn't have to blow up half the world to get has been very important.
You take all the fun out of it, not blowing up half the world.
Yeah, but if
I'm
you're
a
going to blow up
romance
half
writer,
the
I don't
world,
have to blow up half the world.
right? You want to do it because you want to do it, not because you have to do it.
Right?
Right.
If I want
That's
to
how
blow
you
up
make the
half
meat
the
cute.
world,
You've
I'll
got-
write dark fantasy and let my gargoyles loose.
I mean, a perfect meet cute between two evil villains, each with their own
I have
doomsday
a
device.
flash fiction about that. I actually have a flash fiction about that.
So, Nancy, I'm going to start with you on this one, so you don't have to go after Patrick this time. We've kind of danced around this some, the notions of responsibility and research and storytelling and telling characters, whether it's diversity, whether it's things like mental health, whether it's demographics, all these kinds of different factors. When you look at the ethics of what we have, and because again, ethics, morals, all this tend to be tied to us individually as creators. We have the responsibility, we have the contract we have with ourselves, that as to what are the stories we'll tell, what are the kinds of characters we'll create, what lines will we or won't we cross. So, and ultimately, again, we have a contract with our reader in the story we're going to deliver. So if you're looking at research when you're trying to find the right way to tell the story, to create the character, whatever else the case may be, how do we go from your perspective ethically about that process? And do you have a good example of something where you kind of had to struggle a little bit?
I just unmuted because I thought I was still muted. Wow. Maybe Patrick should go first. A good example, I think, is in one of the books in my fantasy series. I have a character who is, by non-fantasy world standards, because that's a different thing. She's bi, and she is figuring out as the book goes along that she's bi, which is not something we see very often, because I think, kind of like us Gen Xers, the bi community is kind of off over here on the side, and unless you're in it or you have good friends in it, people don't really understand what's going on. So part of what I wanted to do with that character and with that particular book was I wanted to show somebody figuring out that about themselves. There are books about people figuring out that they are gay, they are lesbian, they are racist, they are not racist, they are raised by wolves, whatever. There are all these books, and then it just seemed like there was a missing piece. So I took that character, who I kind of already felt like that's where she was heading, and just went completely bonkers with it. And thank God I have a wonderful beta reader who is also in the queer community, who is like, okay, calm down. So I think what's important, what I was getting at here, is that with that book, that was the first one that I actually, it's not the first time I've used a sensitivity reader, but it is the first time that I've shared that responsibility, I think, with somebody who was one of my readers and has now become a beta reader for me, and who is really, really good at holding my hand while they say uncomfortable things about my writing. But I think that we can do all the research ourselves, and we can be very, very certain within ourselves that this is the story we want to tell, and this is how we want to tell it. These are who our characters are, but we are not in the minds of our readers. I don't know if I'm even answering this question properly, but this is just what was coming up into my head as you were talking, Jim, that just, we can do all of our research and we can get everything as right as we think it is. We can give it to our editors and they're, strip it down to its bare bones and say, start over. Just kidding. Not all of them do that. But you need to be able to trust someone that can be a sensitivity reader, or whatever you want to call that particular role for you, that will then sit you down and go, okay, that person's not real. Let's start again, which is what they did for me. I mean, they were like, do you realize that you're doing this, this, and this? No, I didn't, because I was being so careful to this way that I was completely ignoring that way, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm going to stop talking because I'm really not sure I was answering your question at all. Zip.
Rick?
No, Nancy brought a good point about beta readers and such. I think our responsibility is to acknowledge that we don't know what we don't know, and to reach out and ask for help when we need it. I mean, certain things I can sit there and in a vacuum and do my research on and learn and present, and I'm pretty comfortable with that. But there are other things I do not. And if I present that just by myself, I'm going to get it wrong. So I think it is important. I'm lucky in that, I've met thousands of people across a variety of lifestyles as I've been doing this, and most of them have been pretty open about, hey, if you need help about a question, or hey, I'm an expert in this, come to me. And it's like, okay, use those resources. Like Nancy, I have a couple of beta readers that I trust who will absolutely tear apart a story, but help me make it better, help me get characters right. And if I'm wrong about something, they will let me know. And I think, unless I am purposely, because sometimes I do, unless I am purposefully getting something wrong, for example, just to something that drives people nuts, guns. I have a couple characters who don't know anything about guns, and since the story's told from their perspective, they get a lot of stuff wrong, which drives people nuts. But the research is behind that I'm just presenting that as fiction. That's one of those rare cases where I'll purposely do it. But outside of that, I mean, we want to present characters who are believable, scenarios who are believable, and characters who people can relate to.
Jim, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Well, just sort of.
I'm not even sure what I'm answering at this point.
Well, it's kind of a wider question, but from your perspective and, with maybe an example from your own work, your own writing, what's something where you were doing the research, you were doing the character development, you were doing the world building, you were doing the story, but where you were in trying to do things and manage that process, go through and build whatever it was. Do you have a good example where you kind of had to struggle with that and what you went through to come out with a good result on the other end?
I don't know that I've had that issue in the writing itself while I was writing. I do have one of my main characters is biracial. She's black. Her mom's black and her dad's white. But she was mostly raised with her dad. And I, I don't want to, the story isn't about that for her, right? It's about it's about vampires and things. But so I'm concerned. She's one of 3 main characters in the series. And, my concern was I don't want to misrepresent who she would be because I don't have that experience. So as people have already said, you have to utilize, there were some things I did in there that were just so bad, without realizing, the braided hair with the little plastic beads on the end, which I think are so freaking cute. She was wearing those well into her teenage years because she missed her mom, and that was her mom's and I'm like, that feels really stereotyped, and maybe I shouldn't do that, And so there are things I caught first because I wrote it when I wrote that little piece when I was much younger and did not understand as much as I understand now as an old woman, and so that was a thing. And so then, because I recognized I made those mistakes, I went back and gave my manuscript to friends who are black and also friends who are biracial, or in some cases multiracial. Crisis averted. But like everybody's saying, you have to know what you don't know. So.
Lee, how about for you?
With very few exceptions, there's a lot I don't know about the world. What I know. What I don't, I recognize, mostly. There are a lot of guys in my circle of friends who get very nervous when I say, "You're a guy," because they know what the next question is going to be is, "Would you read this and tell me if I've got you right?" Because, well, woman here. My first go-to, of course, is my husband, but I like to get several viewpoints on it before I go. I can tell when someone has not asked when I'm reading for something. And it's a suggestion I have often made. But we owe it to the reader. If the reader happens to be what you're writing about, like men, you owe it to them to get it right. I haven't had a single person turn me down. One, because I'm cute, the other because they want to read what's right. And they understand the process enough to help me out with it.
Wendy, how about for you?
Well, I do know that when I workshop with my fellow poets, ethics and writing comes up quite often. Many poets just want to gush their emotions onto the page, or they use metaphors and forget the human element. And I think we owe it to ourselves to be balanced in our writing, to always remember the human element behind whatever we're creating, be it the images in poetry that we're using to tap into our emotions, or in our prose with our characters, to make sure that we always show that there's, even though there's so-called good and evil, there's always shades of gray. And all our characters are human beings in the end, or aliens, but we relate to them that way with the case of science fiction. So, yeah, I just agree with what a lot of our fellow panelists are saying. And it's just a matter of finding balance in your writing. And I think in the end, that's all we can do to keep ourselves real and relatable to our readers.
Layla?
My first book, I had the most wonderful editor ever. And she taught me what ableist language was, because I'd never even heard the term. Never heard the term in my life. And I had a character who was very, very hard on himself and used a lot of internal monologue and called himself a lot of things that he shouldn't have been. So we very carefully went through the book where she was highlighting so that I could make a list, so I would know and understand what these words were. And while they were words that, like, you know, I'm a Gen Xer, we threw them around all the time. We called ourselves these things. Like I said, I didn't know had never even in my life heard the term ableist language. And she had to like break down the definition for me so that we could go through the book and clean all of that up, to not have it in the story anymore. And because of her and getting to put together a list, they became words I learned how to look out for. You know, 10 years later, my characters they don't even think those words anymore, where the earlier ones would give me those words automatically, and I have to be like, we can't use that. Now it's like the brain has been retrained, so that when the characters are doing inner monologue, and even when they're down on themselves, they have very specific, like they will specifically go into what they are down on themselves about. They will not just be like, I'm, you know, and call themselves a name that they really shouldn't.
Patrick?
So, going back to why you need people to read. Stone Cold Witch has 9 female witches. I am not a woman.
What?
So, it's the hair, but, so it was really super important for me, and there was a wide range of ethnicities and ages. It was really important to me that, like, not only did I get the technical stuff right, but, there's a lot of feelings that other people experience that I don't, because I am not in that group. So, a trans person is going to look at things or be treated in a much different way than an old white guy like me. And the thing is, I can get it factually correct, but I cannot duplicate that emotion because I've never experienced it. And so I think having people, Rick said it, is you go to people who know. And you don't want them just fact check you, which is super awesome if they do. What you really want them to tell you is this invoking the correct feeling that you would feel in this situation? Because if I'm writing a person that is not me, and you are that person in that group or whatever, I want you to come away from my story saying, that writer actually understood what it is to be X. Ancient, 5, whatever. It's so important, because at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're giving your reader an emotional response, whether that's laughter, crying, whatever it is, eternal dread. If you read my early books, Nessa knows, it's like that is the most important gift you can give a reader, is when they've read something you wrote that they come out of the story different, just like your characters did. And the only way to really tap into that is truly, you have to hit them, in the feels, for lack of a better term, so that they know, like, yeah, I might be an old white guy, but I took the time to make sure I understood at a molecular level what it's like for someone in this group to be represented. And, that, I think pulling that off is the hardest part of being a writer.
So I'm going to hop just slightly here and tread into more dangerous waters, and blame Lee for this. But I want, and Rick, I'll be starting on with you for this one. And this is the notion of AI, right? AI has become endemic to everything. And I'm probably going to steal some of this conversation because I've been asked to do a workshop talking about ethical AI in writing and publishing and everything else, and openly saying that the name of this workshop is going to be The Fruit of the Poison Tree. So, Rick, what are your thoughts in terms of AI, and what ethically, or where do your ethics stand around AI in writing, publishing, in that particular, across the space?
All right. So I think the most important thing, and this is unfortunately something I think a lot of writers fail at, is honest disclosure. I'm against, for the most part, using AI, especially in the writing aspect of things, but I've been pretty upfront with saying, okay, am I going to support you if you do this? No, but I'm at least going to respect you more if you're upfront about it, as opposed to lying and pretending you're doing something that you're not. That is kind of a major thing for me. With regards to AI right now, because the big engines are mostly made of stolen stuff, I find it hard to just ethically, I guess, use it at all. But I will say this: if we take that out of the equation, from my perspective, using AI as a tool to get you from point A to point B, I see no issue with, similar to using Photoshop, using spell check. If you use it as an end-all, be-all, as in, let me skip from point A to point Q, I am never going to be good with that. Never at all. But I think my major thing right now is there's so much lying going on with people, just like, submitting stories to publishers or contests that specifically say no AI and then getting caught later. Until we root that out, all the rest of it, it's just, the issue is never going to get better.
I agree. Sadly, there is no ethical way to use AI, because, as Rick says, they were all trained. Well, there are a couple very small exceptions, but all the big ones were trained unethically. So there's no way to use them ethically. But, and I say but only because it's a fact of our life now. It's a fact of our life. And I'm not going to belabor all the things. I think AI can be useful if we set aside that question. If we lived in a world where people were not awful about certain things, and it was ethical, it's useful for things like, I'm awful at titles. I can give you a log line, but I'm awful at titles. So I can say, hey, this is what the story's about. Give me 10 title options. And just like my own, when I do that, I probably won't pick any of those 10, but I'll use those 10 to, jumpstart my brain and try to find something useful. But again, it's not ethical. But I do want to encourage people, people on the panel, but people watching as well, talk to your people about it. One of my closest friends was here this weekend, and this past weekend, and we were at this event, and we were waiting for the thing to start, and we were just chatting, and AI came up, and I said, and I mentioned that they'd all been trained, and violated copyrights, including my own, and she was dumb. She had no idea. She had no idea. And she's not a writer. She's a reader, but she's not a writer. And so a lot of the rest of the public don't even know that work was stolen to train these models. So I would just encourage people, as part of our own responsibility as creators, to just let people know, not necessarily beat them over the head with it and, bludgeon them to death with it, but let them know, because they don't know. And they also don't often know the environmental impact as well, which is also incredibly important. So that's all I have to say about that. I'm tired of talking about AI all the time. I'm so exhausted, y'all.
Lee, how about for you?
I think the editor holds some responsibility. Learn how to spot it. Learn how to reject it. But the writer, if there's aspects of the work in progress that you've used AI on, I think a writer has the responsibility to maybe go back and review their choice, because AI is so detrimental to our profession. It wants to put me on a picket line somewhere. We can't be assisting our own demise, so to speak. And we have a responsibility to each other to keep us in business.
Wendy?
100%.
I was on a different podcast last week, and one of the people brought up, you should create an AI for your website that will pose as you to answer questions to your customers, and thought this was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And all I could think to myself is, really, so you want to create a business as a coach, and yet you're turning over your coaching to a machine? What sense is there in that? And is this machine going to be anywhere as good as you are? And the answer, of course, is no. The human mind always will be superior to the machine. We have the heart and soul. We have far more connectivity than the machine. The machine regurgitates. That's really all it does. If you do use AI to write, you will get the medium. You will get basically slop that is going to come out of the machine. And it might be good for, a sixth grader, but that's about the level that it comes out, I'm afraid to say. It takes a real human being to create honest poetry and honest stories. And, I got to say, with the ethics, I think in the end there will be uses for this new technology, but I think it is up to us as people and as a culture to decide what actually is ethical in its use or not, and then go to our lawmakers and let them know what our ideas are on this, because we have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our children. I just want to also bring up that when you use AI, you're not exercising your own brain. And as writers, the more we write, the better we get. If a machine is doing your writing for you, you don't improve. I mean, that's just a fact. So I'm not gonna bomb blast the AI and all that. I'm a science fiction writer and poet, and I like to look at technology and how it might be in the future in a positive way. And I do see some uses for AI that are positive, for instance, in medicine and in science. It does a lot of the repetitive work that human beings couldn't do in that quick of time. And of that, I think there is a value in that, and it saves lives. So I'm not against AI for those purposes, but the thought of replacing our human voices with a machine, that's just something that we all need to discuss and set up some laws to protect people, quite frankly. And I was very glad to see the latest lawsuit against OpenAI, where they're having to pay the writers that they stole from many thousands of dollars. And I think that's a step in the right direction. And we'll see what else comes in the future. But I think we are heading toward finding ethical ways of actually using AI and rejecting ways that are not ethical. But we'll see how this story continues.
Layla?
To me, AI is like saying you're going to bring the pie for Thanksgiving and then going to the bakery, buying the pie, taking it out of the box, and presenting it as your own pie when you show up at the event. You can say you're going to bring the pie, and you can bring it in the bakery box, and kind of like Rick was saying, it's all labeled that, hey, yeah, I went to the bakery and I bought this pie. But when you take the pie out of the box and show up there going, hey, check out the awesome pie I built, you did nothing. You didn't bake anything. You learned no skill. You put no heart in. My Nana used to say she put her finger in it. She just with stuff that she baked, because a lot of especially the older baker, they put a lot of heart and soul and their grandmother's recipes. And as authors, I feel like that's what we do. We put our experiences, our soul. We go out there. I have done some things like horseback riding in the Rockies. I needed to write it, and I had only been on a horse a handful of times. I needed the full on 8 hours on. We do these things. We do these crazy things so that we can sit and write about them and be like, yeah, I'm going to feel that for the next week and a half. And we can put that feeling in our stories. What does AI put in the stories? Nothing. It puts
Emojis.
Words that it spits out, kind of like word vomit, and not even good word vomit. It just, spits these things out, and people dance their way to Amazon or to a publisher going, look what I made. Dude, you did nothing. You put a prompt into the computer, and it gave you, the equivalent of a really, really bad, like somebody said, 6th grade creative writing class. You did nothing. So I really think that it is made it so people can shortcut and skip and bypass craft. And all that time that we have spent in workshops, in beta reads, in taking the time to learn how to put sentence structure together, learned how to, okay, if I word it this way, I'm going to get people excited. If I word it this way, I'm going to bring down the whole mood of the room because it's going to be sad. We learn how to put emotions into words in the way words are put together in a way that AI can't and should never be allowed to learn, especially not through stealing our work.
Patrick?
So I come at this, I think, from a little bit different perspective because I work in tech, as does Jim. So, I am not really a huge fan of AI, though I use it a lot, though not ever in writing. I agree with everybody. It's just spitting out the average. So you're not going to, you're not going to write the great American novel through AI. It's just not going to happen because you're going to get the mediocre middle of what everybody else has written, because that's all it's doing. It's saying this is the most likely outcome for what you just said, and that is what everybody expects anyway. So why in the hell would you want to? But it's the same problem with every new technology that comes out. Is people jump on it who are get rich quick people who don't want to put the time and energy into learning stuff. Now I will say that there are uses for it if you are using it for personal use. Like I just did a video on how to take AI to build a statue for a superhero. I would never be able to afford an artist to do that work. If I was writing a story and had no skills writing for my child, that was only, my little girl running around with a bunny or something and wanted to do all the art and give that to her as a gift from me, then, no harm, no foul. You're not trying to pass it off as anything other than I did something cute for my child. But as soon as to steal Layla's, take the pie out of the box and present it as your own, you're lying. And whether, AI is ethical or not, you aren't. Because now you are intending to deceive people and make them think something that is patently untrue. So, I have a friend who's trying to use AI to write a book, and they're like, well, it's all my ideas. I'm like, yeah, that's great. Then learn to write. And they were a freaking English major. I'm like, you should be able to write. But they're like, well, it's faster this way. I'm like, whatever. I mean, you do you. But the thing is, there's always, when self-publishing started, people dumped schlock out like crazy. And now all it's done is it made it the schlock that much faster. But the thing is, it's still garbage. So even if you can take and write a book in, 3 hours on AI, it's going to be junk. And so it really isn't worth your time. And all it's going to do is end up causing you a lot more headaches than it ever does, because like Rick was saying, as soon as you get found out, you're done, because nobody will ever trust your work again. And, is it really worth it? I've spent a lot of years, far more than I should have, learning to write, because that's what I love to do. And so if you love to write, why would you want the machine? I want the machine to do my, dishes and my laundry. I don't want to do my creative stuff. That's what I love to do. I want AI to take over my day job so I get paid to sit home and write books, not the other way around.
Yes.
Nancy? And you're on mute.
Okay, I was going to say, AI can learn to turn on the microphone on my laptop for me. One thing that's interesting about this to me is that I remember being on a panel right when this whole kerfuffle started, or when it started infiltrating author spaces, and people were like, you should never use AI ever. And I'm like, do you use Grammarly? Do you use pro writing aid? Does your computer have spell check? Baby, you have used AI, but that is about the end of where you should be using it. Now, I am the biggest pacifist on the earth, and I came upon a bit in one of my books recently that had to have a fight. I hadn't got the slightest idea how to do that. So I went to AI and I said, describe to me a fight. I didn't say on this planet. I didn't say between these characters. I didn't say this one is human and this one is feline. None of that. Just describe a fight. And that, like Venessa said, from that I can move forward and, okay, now I know what a fight's supposed to look like. I mean, I've read them in other books, but I don't want to steal from other authors. So I was like, what do I do? But back to the first point about using it for spell check and things, I remember being in ASL class in college and my professor telling me that it wasn't that I couldn't fingerspell and that I couldn't read fingerspelling. It was that I can't spell. And she was not wrong. My mother, bless her soul, would have told you the same thing. Nancy can write beautifully, but she can't spell. Mom would bleed all over my pages with her red pen because that was the era she was from. So I think using it for things like that, like Patrick said, where it's just repeating, it's ingested a dictionary and now it's telling you what it has learned about how you spell this particular word. I don't have a problem with that. And I would not lie to anybody and say, oh no, I can spell. No, because I can't spell. But to use that as an example, but I would never, why, like you said, Patrick, why would I let it do the thing I like to do? Please go do my laundry. Please clean my house. I mean, we get into a lot of these conversations at work as well because I work in disabilities. And there was the whole thing with NaNoWriMo where they said that this leveled the playing field because saying that you couldn't use AI was ableist or some such nonsense, whatever. We learn how to do these things. We've already learned how to do these things. So why are we so quick to give up and let something else do these things. That is what doesn't make sense to me. And that's why I would never let it write my books for me, because that's the fun part. I mean, I did these except for one. Did I use Photoshop? Yes, I did. Can I draw a stick figure that's not bent? No, I cannot. But I took the time to learn how to use these tools, but it's still me. It's still my ideas. I'm not just saying to the computer, please come up with a cover that has something. My husband said that this one over here looks like a parrot. I think it's because of the green face and the eyes. Come up with something that has light blue eyes that looks like it's part of a tree. No, I did, God, it's backwards. I did that myself. And that's what like what Rick said. If you can't say I did this myself and be honest about it, then maybe you should rethink like all your choices. I don't know, maybe.
Funny that you mentioned the fight scene. I was trying to help a friend. I've done martial arts for 30 years. I was trying to talk a friend through a scene, and we're pulling videos and, trying to like explain to him the techniques. And I was finally like, you know what? If you've got a martial arts studio in your area, go down there, see if somebody's got a few minutes of time to like walk you through how this connects, because we've got all these little video bits and pieces and I can explain to you the moves, but I can't explain it to you in a way that's going to help you understand it so you can write it, like understand the flow. So that's what he ended up doing. He went down to the studio and talked to somebody down there, because there are a lot of people who love to talk about the things they love that are great resources.
I took fencing in college just for that reason. I was the bottom of the barrel when it came to fencing. And, the guys would take the rapier and try to hit me, and they go, oh, I didn't hurt you, did I? Because I was just this little girl, right? But, I learned how it felt to hold the sword. I learned how the muscles moved as I did the very badly done movements. But I learned how it felt. And as a writer, to me, that was the most important thing. And I couldn't get that from an AI. I couldn't get the muscle memory. I couldn't get the way it feels when a sword moves through the air in your hand and all that. And I remember these experiences. So when I write fantasy now, I have that muscle memory within me to draw on when I do scenes. And you cannot get that from a machine. So I love the idea of going to a dojo or to a local thing. I do know when it comes to sword fighting, oftentimes at sci-fi cons, they hold presentations about sword play and do demonstrations and even let you pick up the sword with them. And I'd be too afraid to do it there. These guys are really good. But these are resources to you as a writer to draw on, instead of just turning to a dull machine. And frankly, I think it's a lot more fun. But I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'm a theater kid, so to me, I was using that to do the blocking for me, and then I had to fill in all of the acting and everything, because I don't know what it is to stare down a dragon that's 57 times your size. I don't know where I'm looking, all these kind of things. Once I got the blocking in my head, I put that away, and then I wrote what happened and who did what and all the banter. The banter. How can AI ever do fighting banter?
No,
anyway,
no.
Never.
That sounds like you found a good balance, Nancy. Oh, I'm sorry, Layla.
Oh, no, it still only counts as one, that epic banter from Lord of the Rings when they're...
Well, I keep the 6-foot claymore over here for a couple of reasons. One of which is just in case one of these machines sitting here on my desk decides to become sentient. Number two, you never know when you're going to have to, swing something to make yourself feel better for the day. So, and again, we're kind of just really hitting the surface here of things, but I do want to hit at least kind of one round of question for anybody that's out there about ethics in the business, right? Now, outside of publishers, because we know that they're not entirely human, for everybody who knows who I'm poking out there. But anyway, so Venessa, I want everybody to kind of have that one shot of what's something about the business and the industry and ethics and sometimes the lack thereof that we see today?
Well, this actually relates to AI. There's always been scammers in publishing. There's always been vanity presses that are trying to take the money of the authors and, inexperienced authors who don't understand how publishing works. But there is a huge uptick in those scams now, and they're using AI not just to send the emails, but to actually have video calls. They're using video AI. They're using visual AI to do video calls with potential authors and representing themselves as publishers. And so for me, that's the biggest. I mean, yes, publishing as a business has ethics issues, particularly when it comes to diversity and equity within publishing and all that. That has gone on time immemorial. The newest piece, though, is the incredible rise in scammers. And because the emails are much better written than they've been in the past, because they are AI, they're better written than they used to be. They're harder to spot, especially for novice writers who don't know the business yet. So that's my biggest ethics concern within publishing right now, because I run a writerly support and education group, and we're almost at 1,000 members just by word of mouth. And, we have a lot of new writers, and I worry for them, with this awful rise in AI publishing scams, for lack of a better term. So that's my issue.
Lee, what about you in publishing?
My main concern is plagiarism. It's rampant. And AI is right at the head of the pack. They claim that they're just learning. This claim is not viable because yes, they're taking the style and the syntax from various authors. They're also taking whole paragraphs.
Mm-hmm.
It's theft, pure and simple. I think Venessa mentioned this one. The Nth AI situation, there's a settlement made that supposedly will pay the authors affected $3,000 per book.
I've been on that, by the way, just for
say again.
So there's a number of pieces of criteria around that to get the payout, primarily being that you have the copyright filed.
Yep. And a lot of indie authors
do not.
And a lot of small presses do not.
Yeah, I've covered my people, but I know a lot of that haven't. But my concern is that from the standpoint of the creation of the work, I sort of agree with Wendy about using it to block with. But when it comes to the creation of the work, AI is a threat. And I'll say it again. My concern is keeping us all in business. So that's also from the publisher standpoint.
Wendy?
Well, as an editor and small press publisher, I am concerned about what's being sent to me and how to spot if it is created by AI or not. it's a really sticky problem. I get poetry from all over the world. I mean, from Africa, from Europe, from India. And I have taken time to learn to spot their cultural differences, and that if poetry is coming from this part of the world, if it fits in that kind of world mindset, and so it's not being created by AI. And yet I get some things from poets that seem so perfect and so classic that I have to wonder. And yet maybe that's just the way they write, because in their culture, maybe Kipling and all these are part of their education system, and maybe that's what they feel is poetry. But is it, or is it AI? I don't know. And it's starting to become more and more of a concern, and it's hard for me to know where to look to validate what's coming into my future anthologies. So I really don't have an answer at this point. I'm going to do due diligence because I want to have real human poetry in my books. I do not want to have things that were created by a machine. But it's just part of running a business, and I'm just going to have to train myself and come up with a solution as I can. And that's all any of us really can do.
Yeah, Lee, go ahead.
One of the things that, as an editor reading for something, there are tells. Something that doesn't feel right about the syntax. The same phrases showing up far more than if a human were doing it, and said a human had actually proofed their work. But there are tells, and they just sort of sit there on the page, flashing red. You get a feel for it. Wendy, don't despair. You will do it. But
I'll try
there
my
are
best.
tells. But that's it's possible to be able to spot the AI.
Yeah.
And the more of us that learn, the better.
Layla?
Well, I want to join Venessa in what she said, because it's not just scammy publisher things, but it's so much scammy marketing. And they are dumping, and to some degree, hundreds of emails a week in newbie authors' inboxes, offering to help them market, to make promotional videos for them, blah, blah, blah. And if they do deliver, it's AI created. And most times they don't even deliver. They're just, robbing these newbies who are thinking, oh, somebody's going to help me market, and I don't know anything about marketing. And they've gotten so good with these scams that they've infiltrated so many of the Facebook groups that I can't tell you how many times I'll come across a post, with a new author going like, is this real or is this a scam? Or, hey, I just got offered this thing. Can someone tell me if I need to be blocking this person? Or, unfortunately, they're coming to the groups. They're bringing them to the groups. They're asking for advice before they jump on them, because there's so many other ones who just jump on and are like, oh, I've been floundering with this for, months. Let me go ahead and try this. And then they get ripped off. The newest one now, somebody was talking about this book club scam where they are contacting authors and offering them to show up to do these book clubs. And then they get the author all excited. And then they're like, but there's a small fee for reader. So, I mean, the AIs have created so many scams within the industry that a lot of especially new individuals aren't able to spot. And they're falling for them.
Patrick?
Yeah, I'm one of those people who want to know what they're doing. So I actually went ahead and purchased one of those packages. And it was actually really interesting because it gave me a lot of great metrics on my book that I then turned around and typed into, Claude, and he gave me the exact same metrics. So I'm like, so, what it is it useful? Yeah, it actually was. It had there were a couple things on there I was like, I hadn't thought to look for that. So, yes. So was it a good use of my money? No. I could have done the same thing on my own with a few minutes on Google and, figured it out myself. But I always like to just try and it was not a lot of money because I basically wouldn't pay them what they were asking. It was like, I'll give you $20 if you do this. And if I like it, then I'll let you do it for all my books. They're like, okay, sure. And I'm like, okay, now I know what you're doing. I don't need you. So I don't think that the scams are new. I think what it is that they can put them out in such large amounts now. And to Vanessa's point, they are much better written because they are not, being generated by people who, may or may not know the English language. And so, so it's my wife and I talk all the time about LinkedIn. It used to be like, if you got a post a day up, you were like a high performer. But now LinkedIn is useless because everybody just looks at what the top performers are doing. They generate 30, 40, 50 posts. They throw it in a scheduler and they just blast it, 5, 6, 10 times a day. And so your feed is nothing but garbage. And you're like, Reddit, it's like, and it's all, on a theme. And then the top performer goes, oh, they're doing everything I'm doing, so I'm going to go over here. And then they all do that. And it's like, it's become, parrot culture. Who's popular. See, all my videos, I take after Rick. I just watch what he does, and then, I just basically do what he does with hair. So, so we're just, the in there. Look at all the knockoffs of Lord of the Rings. I mean, God's sake, there were people who, I swear to God, sat down with the book open and wrote the exact same story, just changing the words and the names. And I'm like, these scams have been around forever. It's just technology, every time we get a new level of technology, opens Pandora's box wider. Because, who in the hell would think that email would ever lead to spam? It's like, no, email. I can contact, Facebook. Oh, I can keep up with my friends. I can see their babies. And, then all of a sudden you've got, political maneuvering going on and, social, posturing and all. I'm like, oh my God, it's a hornet's nest. And we've kicked it many times. So there's my point.
Nancy?
Two things. One, unlike Patrick, I did not give them money, but I've started engaging with these emails like, oh, you read such and such book. Like they'll come to me and say they want to market Darkness, for example. That one over there, dang it. Anyway, that one is the first one in a second series in an expansive back catalog. So I know they didn't just stumble over it, but I like to go through and go, so what did you like about it? And then the sales pitch starts again, or they just go back to the beginning and they repeat what they were saying again. I did a blog post on it where I actually copied and pasted in the email conversation that I had with, I don't know, she had a name like Melissa or something that made you feel like, she was a real person. I don't think she was. The other thing is, the question was things that are ethical in publishing. As I think the only person on this that is not part of a small press or not a publisher at all, I'm an indie author. I'm a self-published author.
Same.
One thing that I would ask for is follow up. Be understanding that I'm not new. I've got a catalog, but when I was a new author, I had started this one series. I started a second one. I sent it into this pitch thing. I got a request for pages. I sent them. Nothing. To this day, nothing. And I mean, if you're going to take the time to ask me for pages, send me back an email that just says ick or says something. But I got nothing. Man. So I just went ahead and I knew how to publish it myself, sort of. And I took some time and learned some new things and talked to some more people. And that book has been out since 2019. And I pray every day that I'm going to get the email back that goes, I got your pages finally and I love them. Well, sorry. Something. I feel like there's a lot, because there is a lot coming into, especially people who are accepting submissions. I feel like that it gets to the point, like I get sometimes at work with my students, where if there's too many requests coming in, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll stack these up and I'll answer them later. That person doesn't know that I have all this going on. That person doesn't know that I've stacked it up and I will answer it. All they know is that they didn't get an answer. So, not that any of you lovely people would ever do anything such, just putting it out there to the universe. If somebody sends you a query letter and a horrible manuscript, dumpster fire on a page, at least write them back and say, I don't think so right now. Don't just leave it hanging. So, and go to my blog if you want to see me make fun of an AI marketing scam, because that was fun.
All right, Rick, last word.
All right. Well, stepping back from the AI, one thing I have always hated about this industry, and in all fairness, it's not just publishing, and I think it really just comes down to, this is the serpent in this Garden of Eden, is that bad behavior is rewarded as long as you're making money. It's rewarded, it's forgiven. I could throw a few names out there, which I guarantee everybody in this panel is probably going to know, of these people who have been in this industry for like a decade or more, were constantly doing scummy things, but are constantly making money because people are willing to look the other way as long as you're making bank. Some of the biggest, author groups out there. Sorry, cat tail and face here. They've done the same thing. Hey, here's a keynote speaker. Yeah, we know they've done scummy things, but they know how to sell books. Mm-hmm. That is really what it comes down to, is that, as long as that persists, as long as we have that thing of, okay, yeah, you tried to buy your way onto the New York Times list, but, you still sold 50,000 books, so we love you anyway. As long as we do that, it just encourages other people to do scummy things.
Can I also add, can I riff off that? I think that is so important in terms of our own personal ethics as human beings, is not to be okay with that. So I help run a convention called Multiverse, and we had, yes, it's my favorite. We had someone who was going to be our artist guest of honor a couple years ago, and we were super excited about it. And then we found out he doesn't use AI for his main part of his art, but he had been playing, and he'd been very, very transparent about it. He was posting on Twitter about it and all, about testing out AI, doing the backgrounds of some of the art that he does. He does a lot of comic stuff. And so we have a very hard line when it comes to AI. And so we ended up having to have that difficult conversation, and it was he understood and he was fine, we were mutually respectful, but we had to make that difficult choice because that was against the ethics of the convention, and so I think as human beings, there are people that I would never work with because I have issues with things that they've done because they don't align with my moral out. They don't have to believe the same things I do, but my morals are a baseline, really. You just gotta not be a dick, and you have to care about other people, and you have to value people over money. That's basically my baseline. So I think that is also a super important thing to think about, and think about whether you're willing to support someone who goes against your own moral code just because they make money. And that's not a thing I'm willing to do. And everybody's got to make their own decision, right? For some people, yes, that is a thing they're willing to do, obviously, because of what Rick just said. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of add that little piece that I think we all kind of touched on a little part of it, but it was not together. So, okay, thanks.
Well, I think that's a good spot to wrap this one up. But again, we're all, as always, only really scratching the surface. But before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you. You know, website, social media, of course, what book they might want to stack up for somebody on these holidays. So, Layla, you're up first.
Well, you can find me at Layla Dorine, an author at Wix.com, Rainbow Lyrics and Mellow Mushrooms, Facebook, Instagram, and I'm trying to get better at TikTok and Twitter. My last book released on December 3rd. It was Leo and Lace. That is 2 snow leopards and a human, fated mates. And I have another one coming out on the 13th. That is A Daddy for Christmas Nova, set in Hawaii because I don't want to write about snow. I have enough of it outside.
Patrick?
Hi, you can find me at patrickdugan.net. You can find me on all the socials as Dugan Author or Patrick Dugan Author. My last book was Stone Cold Witch, set in Asheville with 9 witches that are trying to stop the apocalypse.
Nancy?
You can find me at nancyedunne.com because if it's not my whole name, I will get it wrong. I'm on a lot of the socials. I don't even know, whatever. It's usually at NancyD_writes. And yeah, that's where I am. Oh, and my blog that I mentioned earlier is called Isn't the Lettuce Brave? I promise if you put that into a search engine, bam, because who else would do that anyway?
That's awesome.
Rick?
Well, you can find me at rickgualtieri.com or on pretty much any of the socials. I am Rick Gualtieri. If you can't spell that, which a lot of people can't, just Google Bill the Vampire. That'll eventually bring you to something I've done. And as far as books, I would say probably because it's a Kindle monthly deal right now, if you're looking for some werewolf action, check out The Girl Who Punches Werewolves, which is book 1 of my High Moon series.
Nice.
Venessa?
And to go with the theme, you probably also can't spell my name because we're both Italian. But you can find me at venessagiunta.com, or if that's too challenging, which I understand, if you go to sleekbio.com/VanessaG, you'll find me. But you have to spell Vanessa with an E, not an A. So,
Lee?
You can find me at harphaven.net. That handy links to my e-store, Harphaven Merchanter. I'm on most of the socials. Just type out Lee Martindale and you'll find me. I'm going to make a recommendation for Bard's Road. But for Christmas, books make great gifts. And if you want it autographed, you'll find the link for Merchanter also on harphaven.net.
Wendy?
Well, you can always find my website, which is wendyvancamp.com. Comes up pretty easily. But I usually recommend that you look for me on Instagram. My handle there is No Wasted Ink. Yes, I am a haiku poet. So that was the origin of that. And on my Instagram, I do have a link tree. And it's just one little link that you click, and it has everything. It'll take you to my website, my small press, my podcast, and, of course, my monthly newsletter, which is free. It has a personal ramble, a writing tips essay for all you writers out there, and my poem of the month. And you can either read it on Substack or you can listen to it on Spotify as a podcast, your choice. But again, look for me at No Wasted Ink on Instagram.
And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingprose.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we'll see you again soon.